Let's it again. You double third, double third, double third. Leading tone goes up. Welcome back to Compositions Allies. My name is Barney. I'm a classical composer, and this is a channel for composers as well as performers interested in composition. In today's episode, I will show you how to properly voice a deceptive cadence, so a 5 to 6 progression. We will talk about the rules and how to avoid parallel fifths and octaves. We will show you in major keys versus minor keys, though the difference is quite superficial. I will show you the one major exception to the rules, so do pay attention. And I will also be going over different types of spacing, so it's tighter spacing versus wider spacing. A couple of notes about the deceptive cadence. It is a 5 to 6 progression. Okay, a root position 5 chord going to a root position 6 chord. So the dominant going to the submedian. In a major key, that means you will have a major chord going to a minor chord. Surprise. And in a minor key, you're going to have a major chord going to another major chord. Surprise. Okay, and something to keep in mind in minor keys that we have to raise the 7th scale degree to get that leading tone effect. So you should expect to see some kind of natural or sharp. And of course, the 7th scale degree is the third of the dominant. A quick warning that the difference between minor chords and major chords can be superficial when it comes to harmony. If you study a Bach chorale, you'll see, okay, in a minor key, we go often to the 7th, the key of the 7th will modulate, but in major, that's not the case. So there is a difference on that level, but when you're looking at deceptive cadences, we will see that functionally, they're pretty much the same. Finally, the reason for the deceptive cadence is to replace the perfect authentic cadence. Notice the very conclusive feeling when you have the leading tone in the soprano. You could also have the second in the soprano, and you have a leap of a 4 for 5th in the bass. This will stop the piece, so the first track solution is to replace it with a deceptive cadence. In French, we call it la cadence rompue. All right, rules for the deceptive cadence is very simple, but it needs lots of repetition. You're going to double third, double third, double third. Okay, what this means is that the leading tone needs to resolve up to the tonic, and the other two voices are going to move in opposite direction to the bass. Listen again, you double third, double third, double third. Leading tone goes up to the tonic, as one would expect, and the other two voices are going to move in opposite direction to the bass. First example. Let's play it again. So the leading tone is in the soprano, right? We're in A major, so it's G sharp. It goes up to A. Other two voices move opposite directions. So tenor is going down by step, and the alto is leaping to its first note, its next note. Notice that if the tenor were to go up by step, we would have parallel fifths. If the alto were to go up by step, we would have parallel octaves. So the beauty of good harmony training, which includes voice leading, is that you also have good counterpoint. This is not going to replace counterpoint, but do notice that good quality counterpoint, the elements of it, are already baked into quality harmony training. Example 2. One more time. Leading tone is an alto. It goes up to the tonic. Soprano goes down by step, so we get a unison. Generally, in harmony, we're going to avoid unisons because we want, like, on French, c'est on recherche la plentitude. We want the fullness of sound. But when it comes to deceptive cadence, if you're going to have it voiced in a tight register, it's almost inevitable you'll have a unison. It sounds excellent, and especially with voices on a piano, it's hard to perceive the unison, but it does sound quite excellent. Of course, tenor has to move in opposite direction to the bass. Notice that if the tenor were to move in a similar motion, we would have parallel octaves. If the if the alto were to move in similar direction to the bass, we have parallel fifths. Something to notice, and I don't know if you can perceive it through a recording, you may have to play at piano, is that parallel fifths are a problem for many reasons, but one of them is that when you have parallel fifths, the second fifth sounds very empty. Notice the difference, right? The fullness that we love for the first fifth is lost when we get to the second fifth, okay? In French, you say très vide. It can have a very kind of mediocre effect. So we do not want parallel fifths. Parallel octaves don't really hurt the ear necessarily, like it can sound like a doubling, but it can confuse the listener because we had 4 voices and suddenly we're going to hear 3 voices. So it's going to bring unnecessary attention where it shouldn't be. Now, let's look at an exception to the rule. So here, notice that the alto, which has a leading tone, right, we're in F major, so it's E natural, goes down. And the reason it can do that in major keys is because the soprano is resolving its note. Now, you may think, okay, great. When I have the alto in a higher region and the soprano can catch its note, then I can go back to the normal, quote, normal way of doubling, which is, double the root. However, listen to the original version. When we double the third, it has this kind of soft, pleasing effect. In French, I call it la douceur de la tierce doublée, okay, or the softness of the double third. If you can't perceive it here, you may have to just play a piano and you will see what I'm talking about, okay? It's undeniable. Versus this exception, when we're doubling the root of the 6th chord, it has a harsher feeling. So even though you may have at your disposal the option to voice in this way, it still may be advantageous for the sound to double the third. Also notice that this doubled third is an F, and we're in F major. So the doubled third of the 6th, okay, so in the cadence rompue, in French, in the Deceptive Cadence, is the global tonic. We're going to go on to minor keys, and functionally the cadence rompue, or the Deceptive Cadence, is the same as in major, but I just want to point out a couple details, okay? Don't forget in minor, we have to raise the 7th scale degree. So the leading tone is in the soprano, so we have an F sharp, because we're in G minor. It goes up to the tonic. Now, the other 2 voices, of course, move in opposite direction to the bass. But not only do they move in opposite direction, one of the voices is leaping by a third, and the other voice is going down by step. The voice that moves down by step is doubling the third, aka the global tonic. Why do I point this out? Well, when you're checking your harmony exercises, it's nice to have different avenues to verify. So you verify the traditional way, you go one by one, but then maybe you want to do a rapid fire check. You look at your, in French we say chiffre, okay, you put the Roman numerals. Oh, I see a deceptive cadence. You look at deceptive cadence, do I see a leap of a third? Do I see a leap down a step? And of course, leading tone going up. Another thing I want to bring your attention to is the relationship between bass and soprano. So on the dominant, notice that soprano is on the third, okay? This is important to recognize because when we get more advanced, for example, if you do a 4, 6 to 5, I personally found that almost always I end up on an octave or 2 octaves between the soprano and the bass. So when I note this scale degree of the soprano, you're actually speeding up your progress because you're not going to get quicker at harmony by rushing through exercises, but if you start to notice these patterns sooner, then you're going to be able to complete the exercises much quicker. That is how you improve at harmony. Exercise 4. One more time. Notice leading tone, of course, goes up to the tonic. Other voices move in opposite direction. One is going to be leaping a third. The other is going to be done by step, and that will lead to the double third. Soprano on the dominant is on the 5th. Again, we're on root position chords, so we can't do too much with that information, but we have to start noticing that relationship, okay? And I highly recommend that you, en chiffre, as in French, you put the Roman numerals so you know exactly what the functions are, so you see those patterns quicker. And then sometimes it's helpful to put the scale degrees of the soprano. I don't always find it helpful, but especially if you're on a dominant or any kind of cadence, it is good because you're going to start to notice certain patterns. One other thing to bring your attention to is notice the tight intervals between the bass and the tenor. They're on thirds. Notice the wider intervals in the upper two voices, soprano and alto, all together. So this chord has a rather unique spacing because general tendency when we do harmony is we want tighter intervals on top and kind of wider intervals on bottom. But as you start to do these harmony exercises, you may start to see your own natural preference emerge, and hopefully you have a teacher that will kind of encourage that. Example 5. Leading tone goes up to tonic. Remember, we need an accidental if we're in minor, okay? We have the D sharp because we're in E minor. Other voices, opposite direction of the bass. One leaps a third, other goes down by step. It needs to be so automatic. I understand it takes time, but it needs to be automatic at a certain point, which I'll talk about in a second. Notice the unique spacing. So we start off with really kind of large spacing, which then leads to a larger disposition. And notice on the 5 that we have a 5th between the lower voices, a 6th between the upper voices, and notice the resolution on the 6th chord. We end up a tight interval in the bottom two voices, a third, tight interval in the top two voices, a third. Okay, so nice and crunchy, but then a wide interval, an octave between the soprano and the tenor, so the intermediary voices. I find this spacing very lush and full, and French, c'est très chaud, okay? And it is just something you can start appreciating, that not all deceptive cadences are the same. Functionally, they're basically the same, but definitely in the affect, there's a different quality. Let's go to exercise 6. Leading tone and tenor goes up to F sharp. We have tight spacing, so it's almost inevitable that we're going to have a unison, okay? It sounds perfectly beautiful. Other two voices, one leaps a third, the other by step, okay? Should be automatic now, we hope. Something I want to quickly mention is when you are doing the French harmony, French style, what it eventually ends up with is a tout de style. So you will do exercises in the style of Schumann, or maybe just romantic style of Mozart, and you may be given a first violin line, and you'll have to find the other 3 voices for a string quartet. And it has to be in style. You have to take thematic material that you saw that's presented in the violin 1 line. And of course, there will be a deceptive cadence at some point, but it will have to be ornamented and in the style of Mozart. So there's a lot of things to consider. So when you get to that point, if you do want to go to that point, okay, or you might just do orchestration or something more complex, you absolutely need the mechanics of the deceptive cadence to be rapid fire. So in order to do that, you have to do a lot of exercises. It's not just an isolated context where we know it's deceptive cadence. It'll also be like you given a soprano line and you have to hear where is it placed, okay? So it does take time to apply it, but it has to be rapid fire. I think it's a requirement for composers to get that base level in harmony. If you really want to be excellent and have that freedom, you got to be able to voice the deceptive cadence like easy peasy, no thinking. Play this exercise one more time. Notice the richness of the chord, because it's elevated quality. Now, let's look at, can we do an exception? Because, right, the leading tone is in the tenor. So in 6B, I put the tenor went down. Okay, and the alto is catching its resolution. This does not work. First off, the tenor is doing a kind of a step, an augmented second, which is not allowed. I'll talk about it in a second. But the alto is certain schools of tradition in France. There's not total consensus. When an upper voice catches a lower voice and resolves its note, they have to be in the same group. So an alto is a female voice, a tenor is a male voice. Some teachers will say, well, the ear is not going to perceive that as a satisfactory resolution. So 6C, we revoiced it so the alto had the leading tone and it goes down by steps. So now the soprano is catching its resolution. This still does not work because the alto is doing an augmented second.